Trump tariffs are triggering mounting concerns and much uncertainty about global trade as protectionist policies look to rule markets. We have more on Press Perspective today. Welcome to Press Perspective for this Thursday, February 13th, here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Starting today, our panel session will include a weekly focus on sectors of the South Korean industry that look to be affected by Trump tariffs. Accordingly, today we touch upon the steel industry and more amid the announcement of the first blanket tariffs of 25% on all steel and aluminium imports into the U.S. market. For more on this, I have Steven Borowiec with Japanese news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Steven, as always, it's great to have you here.
Good afternoon.
I also have Professor Shin Sang-hyup of International Relations at Kyung Hee University joining this talk virtually. Professor Shin, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
My pleasure too.
Right, and Professor Shin, before we speak with you, we are going to turn to Steven for some background information with regard to the steel and aluminium imports imposed by the Trump administration. So Steven, let's start off then with the 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium imports into the U.S. market starting, I believe, mid-March. South Korean steelmakers are expected to be affected, of course. What has been the response thus far?
Acting President Choi Sang-mok said yesterday that he is convening some government efforts to assess the potential impact of these measures and craft a possible response. In some reporting I did yesterday, I got comment from POSCO, which is South Korea's largest steelmaker, and they said something similar, that they are looking into how this might affect them and trying to come up with the best way to respond. I think at this stage, it's a little bit difficult to say how South Korea and how the private firms will respond. What we do know is that they will seek meetings with their U.S. counterparts. They will seek to engage in direct dialogue, and they will seek to kind of impress upon their U.S. counterparts that the two countries have a long-standing alliance and have this long history of giving each other the kind of preferential treatment that allies tend to give each other, and that this has, for a very long time, been a mutually beneficial arrangement, that they have security ties and they have commercial ties and they have their close diplomatic partners. And there's this whole big framework, there's this whole big context that is much bigger than these particular individual measures of these tariffs. So where it gets tough for guys like me is the fact that a lot of this is going to go on behind the scenes. Companies and governments at this stage in the game want to be really careful what they say publicly. They don't want to show up too much of their hand, and they don't want to say anything that might antagonize the other side. So I just think at this point they're going to be trying to cultivate their relationships and try to Trump did, if you look at the fact sheet that the White House put up, Trump did say that he would consider potential exceptions for countries that have a security relationship with the U.S., which South Korea, of course, does. So I think it's clear that there is a fair bit of alarm on the South Korean side about this, but at the same time, South Korean policymakers and South Korean private firms are used to dealing with all manner of challenges and tend to tackle these things head on. I'm sure they'll do that here too. Right, and that was the case back in 2018, right, when Mr. Trump imposed steel tariffs on imports into the U.S. back then as well. How did South Korea exactly deal with this import duty back then, 2018? It was similar in that they initiated dialogue and they were able to agree on quotas. And so what this meant was that the tariff would be suspended for the first 70% of South Korean steel that entered the U.S. According to the levels recorded between 2015 and 2017. So that was a kind of mutually agreeable measure because it saved South Korean firms from bearing the financial brunt of these, tariffs are a kind of heavy-handed, very kind of punitive measure. It allowed them to continue to ship to the U.S., which is a really important market, and it allowed the U.S. to keep this measure in place and to not have to, suffer the indignity of saying that they were peeling it back. Well, they were just, adjusting it in a way that they felt was appropriate to this particular country that they have a pretty comprehensive alliance with. The hope will have to be this time around that they can achieve something similar, but the times have changed. They are dealing with a more determined and a kind of emboldened Trump administration in Washington compared to several years ago.
Right, and before we delve further into the situation here in South Korea, Stephen, Canada, it's the largest supplier of steel and aluminium to the U.S. How is Canada and its related industries dealing with this latest tariff?
Prime Minister Trudeau has called them completely unjustified, and it's kind of similar in that we're talking about another customary U.S. ally. Canada and the United States have a very comprehensive and very mutually beneficial trading relationship. They have the longest unfortified border in the world. They have decades and decades of working together in all kinds of different ways. Canada is also doing kind of what Korea is in that they are being careful what they say publicly and they are addressing this behind the scenes. But Trudeau has alluded to the possibility of possible tit-for-tat measures, possibly enacting tariffs that would be kind of similarly punitive to the U.S. But I think they're hoping that before they have to go down that road, that they'll be able to reach some kind of agreement that would avoid such a kind of punitive scenario.
Right. And now then, Professor Shin, with regard to Mr. Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminium imports during his first term, the World Trade Organization earlier ruled them in violation of global trade rules. Could you start off by reminding us about that particular ruling?
Yes, as you explained, in 2018, in his first presidency, during his first presidency, President Trump imposed tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imported into USA. At the time, the USA government emphasized that this is the decision because of the unfair competition and national security interests. But at the time, the WTO, World Trade Organization, they rebuffed the argument. They said that the WTO, they said that the duties did not come in at the time of war or other emergency. And but the USA government did not respect the decision made by the WTO. At the time, so the WTO said that if USA government did not respect the decision made by WTO, and the countries who brought the complaints entitled to take the retaliatory tariffs on the products produced and exported by the USA government.
Right.
So, I think because of the decision, made by the USA, we can say that the spark the trade war around the world, and after that, after this decision, and even the USA government there are the restrictions, protectionistic trade policy imposed on their trading partner countries. But if I give some more explanation about it, Mr. Trump signed the deals with some countries exemptions from the tariffs or admitting their shipment up to a certain level. Already, Stephen explained it. But actually, this time, the tariff imposed by the USA government, we have to wait and see, but we cannot eliminate the possibility that USA government can change their trade policy to some degree. But we have to wait and see.
Right. Professor Shin, I understand some American businesses are also expected to be negatively affected by Trump tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. What more can you share with us?
Well, of course, for the aluminium and then steel producers, in the United States, for them, it can be a good, they could gain some positive effects from the USA government decision this time. But the four other industries which use these metals imported, such as aluminum and steel imported from the other countries, they could get the negative impact from the decision made by the USA government. Of course, this will be a negative factor for the consumers in the USA, because that the prices of the products produced by the local producers using the imported steel and aluminium, that their prices will go up, and then subsequently the consumer should pay more money to buy the products. Well, actually, we have to review the data showing the production volume of the aluminium and steel industries in USA just after the decision made by the USA government in 2018. At the time, all figures shows us that the aluminium and steel industry in USA, they could gain some more profits. They could increase they increase their production volume. But the other countries, as I said before, the industries use the imported metals such as the aluminium and steel. Their production volume decreased, and they got some losses in their business activities. So I think this time, even though the USA government emphasized that this decision, there will be no exemptions and exceptions. That means that they will impose very higher tariffs on imported products. So the negative impact which will be given to USA, the industries using the imported metals and the consumers, could be more serious than the 2018 and just after the decision by the Trump administration. But certainly there must be some negative impact on the USA industries using the imported metals.
Right then. Professor Shin, all that being said, how capable is South Korea of better navigating these trade initiatives by the new Trump administration, especially, of course, Professor Shin, keeping in mind our political paralysis as we speak?
Yes, well, certainly we have some concerns because of the political situation facing the Korea right now. But in a word, the Korean government seems to make every effort to build close ties with the USA government. The Trump administration, in order to protect the interest of the Korean industries. Well, if I give you more detail, the actions taken by the Korean government, well, the acting President Choi Sang-mok, a few days ago, he emphasized that he will make every effort to talk with the U.S. administration about 25% tariffs, which imposed by the USA government on steel and the aluminium products imported into USA. And also the trade minister emphasized that he will make every effort to find it out there a possibility to have negotiation on the tariffs. They are right now, Korean government would actively consider whether there is a room for negotiation on the tariffs, because we had some experience already in 2018. At the time, the USA and the South Korean government agreed on the annual duty-free steel quota of 70% of volume shipped to the USA for 3 years from 2015 to 2017. But I think, as I already explained, that USA government this time made it clear that the higher tariffs would come in without exceptions or exemptions. But I think considering the responses from all over the world and considering the situation facing the global community, maybe we cannot eliminate the possibility that USA government could change their trade policy. But it seems that it could not be very easy, because that, as I said before, USA government made it clear that there will be no exemptions and exceptions. Because of this kind of very stubborn position of the USA government, many are the world leaders, Prime Minister of Japan, Japanese government, and then Canadian President, all of the leaders right now seems to making every effort to have some talks with the USA government. But as I mentioned before, we cannot have the summit diplomacy in order to protect the interest of the companies. In this context, I have some concerns. But we have to wait and see. But on the long-term and mid-term basis, I think this can be an opportunity for the Korean government to use this situation to diversify our the market. And market means that the steel and aluminium products. But if we can pioneer new markets, I think on the midterm or long-term basis, we can use this situation as a kind of another stepping stone to keep our competitiveness in our products in the global market.
Right, as quite a number of scholars are saying, using this time of crisis, if you will, to use it as a chance for opportunity then. Steven, that being said, what more can you tell us about the South Korean steel industry and its prospects going forward, especially in light of Mr. Trump's tariffs?
The industry was facing a number of challenges even before this started. I believe that some major South Korean steel makers had closed domestic factories over the course, not all of them, but a few of their domestic factories over the most recent few years. A big variable has been competition with cheaper steel from China and how that Chinese companies have been kind of undercutting their South Korean rivals. South Korean companies, is what they do have going for them is a reputation for quality. And so, actually, I spoke to another expert yesterday who told me that there is a kind of opportunity perhaps in the silver lining here because the Trump administration has assessed even steeper tariffs on China. And so that could have the effect of eroding the price competitive advantages that Chinese producers have had, and then thereby making South Korean steel, higher quality steel, kind of more price competitive in comparison. So that could have a kind of a counterintuitive positive effect for South Korean companies. As Professor Shin laid out, we do have to kind of wait and see. I think that any kind of heavy industry in a country like South Korea that is a petroleum importing country and has high labor costs and is not, because of China, not really able to compete on price, has to compete on quality and has to compete on innovation and technology and all these other things. It really highlights the need to invest in innovation and invest in doing things better and more efficiently. The South Korean government kind of got away from that in the recent years. The government enacted this big cut to the R&D budget. I think we're kind of now seeing that the wisdom in continuing to invest in the competitiveness of South Korean industry. As you laid out, in every crisis there is a chance to create opportunity. So we'll have to see how the industry responds. And I think the track record shows that companies like POSCO and companies like Hyundai Steel are quite good at withstanding challenging circumstances.
Steven, Mr. Trump has also avowed reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trade partners to be announced most likely Thursday local time. What exactly does he mean, and how does that look to affect all those involved?
Well, it's a big question. I mean, I can answer it in two parts. I can say that what a reciprocal tariff really is it's what it would amount to the Trump administration, like going through the list of every country that imposes duties on imports of American goods and then assessing equal or greater tariffs in response. What it would mean is hard to answer. I mean, the underlying subtext is if the U.S. government had heretofore not assessed tariffs in response, presumably there was some reason for that. There was some economic or trade-related reason why the policymakers at the time decided that it was not in U.S. interests to assess tariffs on this other country's good. Presumably it was something in the bilateral trade relationship, or it was perhaps a particular U.S. industry that needs a certain kind of import to be inexpensive. It's really hard to have this conversation at this stage in the development because the inflationary effects of the tariffs have not taken effect yet. So the Trump administration at this stage in the process is able to depict tariffs as a kind of simple or economically beneficial measure when everybody knows that tariffs, the reason that countries generally don't employ them all that much is because they make everything more expensive when you are a country that imports a lot of your consumer goods, and if you are a manufacturing country like the US still is to some extent, it makes things like steel and coal and all those other things more expensive. So the longer term tenor of this conversation is going to change eventually, and we can only kind of guess at what that is. But I do think that the public impression of tariffs in the US is going to change quite significantly in the coming months when the inflationary effects become more apparent.
Right. Then in the meantime, then, Professor Shin, because we have about a minute left, speaking as a scholar, briefly, what does history tell us about the practice of we charge you what you charge us?
Yes, I think it has a quite long story, but I think to make a long story short, the beginning of the very protectionistic trade policy of U.S. trade policy started, in the beginning of the 20th century. In 1930, there was a trade act called the Smoothy and Hawley Trade Act. So USA government took the very protectionistic trade policy, and then for first 2 decades, they kept on their trade policy. In 1947, the GATT was established. Why? Because of the protectionism. Protectionism means that if a country imposed the tariffs, the partner country imposed the additional higher tariff rate on the products imported from the trading partner country. We call it reciprocal trade, tariffs. So escalation effects, right? So international trade was frozen. And then, so it was very negative for every countries involving in trade. So from the 1947, just after the World War II, many countries want to liberalize international trade. So what I'm saying is that history tells us that one lesson, that is the reciprocal, the tariffs, which is very protectionist trade policy, is very, very negative on the long, eventually, for every countries doing business trade around the world. So this lesson I hope that can be a lesson for the American government, particularly Trump administration. So another thing is that the very protectionist trade policy taken by the Trump administration can last for quite a long time. I think that it's a matter of time. Maybe there will be some changes in the direction of USA trade policy from protectionist-oriented policy to more liberalized trade policy, I think.
Right, so hopefully history then will not repeat itself. All right, Professor Shin, thank you so much for your insights today.
My pleasure.
And Stephen, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching.